Hi y'all, Kraken Latte here. Welcome to a new mini-series where I cover my results from leveling through each zone in World of Warcraft. This data is being collected in order to make my new leveling guides. As you can imagine, going through each zone in WoW, sometimes even twice due to faction differences, is going to take a while. So, in the meantime, I'll share my findings with you. Since the process of leveling was changed in 9.0, including the introduction of Chromie Time and the removal of heirloom buffs, zones give different results than before, and that's why I'm redoing them all. I'm not going to repeat the ground rules again so as not to bore all of you who saw the first episode. If you haven't seen it though, please go watch that so you can understand my results and not wonder why yours may look different. Let's get right into it. Alright, so I finally have Northrend done. This expansion took me a lot longer to finish than I expected. I knew a lot of these zones were long, but I think a lot of these zones were longer even than all of the Outland zones. These are some long zones, so prepared for some very big times. But XP-wise, I think it fared better than Outland did, so let's dig into those details. Starting with Borean Tundra. So, I did this in multiple brackets to give it a run for its money, if you will, because this zone used to be on my old leveling guide, and it looks like it fared pretty well. So, in the 10s range, as Alliance, I went from 10 to 32 in 284 minutes. That is a lot of levels and a lot of time. Now, it's not the best time, ever for that range, but that's a lot of levels. Moving into the 30s bracket, I did Alliance from 30 to 44 in 230 minutes, and this is where I did the Horde equivalent to see what the similarity was, and that was 30 to 44 in 320 minutes. And no, those aren't typos on the time. Alliance is actually that much faster than the Horde, even though they both have the same amount of levels out of it. So that I thought was interesting. I actually had to go back and double check my data, and it is correct. So yes, the Horde is indeed that much longer. So as you can see, that's why I have 3 different sets of Alliance data here, because this is the Alliance zone, we'll put it that way. So in that spirit, jumping into the 40s range, I have some shocking information for you here. I went from 40 to 50 in 193 minutes. Now that may not seem too shocking to you, when you're not looking at a full list of data like I am, but Northrend's Borean Tundra is actually amazing for the 40s range. Comparable to High Mountain, which if you saw my Legion Broken Isles video, then you'll know that Broken Isles are really good, and High Mountain is the best one that I've found for the 40s range so far. Northrend's Borean Tundra is really close to that, and the bonus here is you get all the way to 50, unlike High Mountain, which only gets you to 48, if you start at 40. So that is interesting data. High Mountain is still faster, but you do get those 2 actually extra levels at the end there, so that is interesting. Borean Tundra, still really good. I'm actually impressed, and this was a really good start to Northrend. So, and now we have the contested zone of Howling Fjord. This one is one of the 2 quote-unquote starter zones for all of Northrend, so I decided to do this one in the 10s range. As Alliance, I went from 10 to 30 in 371 minutes, that's a really long zone, and as Horde, I went from 10 to 28 in 319. As you can see there, the Alliance does get 2 extra levels, and their time is a lot higher. So there is definitely a lot more quests on the Alliance side there, which is interesting that there is a bit of a difference. Well, a big difference rather. The zone is really long, and even if you're in your 40s, it's still, that's a long zone. That is a long zone. Really cool zone though. Definitely love Howling Fjord. I love all the Vrykul stuff. And there's a lot of cool Vrykul lore. If you have any interest in them, I definitely recommend looking up their wiki. Some interesting facts about them and a vampire history. And next we have the contested zone of Grizzly HIlls. I used to quest here a lot before the level squish, and it was a pretty good zone then, so I decided to do this one in the 40s for funsies. So, starting with Alliance, I went from 40 to 47 in 158 minutes. Not too bad there. And on Horde, I went from 40 to 46 in 156 minutes. Now, this zone I left as contested even though the quests are fairly similar for both sides, but there is a slight level difference, and here's why. Alliance gets at least one whole level ahead of Horde, and that is simply because one of their quest chains between the two factions is completely different. And the Horde version is a group quest chain, because it's all like pit fighting and stuff. Like, you literally need a group for it, and since you can't use the group finder until 50, and if you're questing alone, you definitely need a group for those quests, because I got my face handed to me. Whereas the Alliance quest chain that replaces that Horde version is not group based, so that's kind of an interesting decision there. But regardless, that's why. Otherwise, this would be pretty much the same, because you can see the time is almost to the minute the same. So, there you go. And for our next contested zone, we have Dragonblight. This is a very large zone with a lot of ground to cover, so I decided to do it in the 30s to try to give it a better time. So, as Alliance, I went from 31 to 42 in 260 minutes, and as Horde, I went from 30 to 42 in 269. Now the times are very, very similar, but I think Horde actually gets a little more quests than the Alliance did, because they did get an entire level more than the Alliance did. So I guess the Horde kind of wins out in Dragonblight here. Otherwise, the zone is pretty much the same for both factions, but some of the later quests involving like the Scarlet Crusade and such are quite different. So I think that's where the Horde actually gets some more there. So that was our contested zones. Now let's move into the faction neutral zones. And as a reminder, contested zones are ones that have two different sets of data, because the Horde and Alliance factions are different. And then the faction neutral is the ones that have data that is really, really similar, if not identical. So starting with Zul'Drak, I went from 32 to 42 in 274 minutes. It's not great, but it's not terrible. You'll obviously get more levels if you come here earlier. The earliest you can come here to Zul'Drak is at 20, but it's a rather large zone, so I decided to be here in the 30s. For our next faction neutral zone, we have Sholazar Basin. This is another actually pretty good zone, and I wish you could come here at 10, but you can only come here at the earliest of 20. So I did this one twice. I went from 20 to 32 in 176 minutes, which is pretty good. Not optimal for that range, but pretty good. Pretty good. And then in the 40s, I went from 41 to 47 in 130, which is a shame that that kind of drops down like it does, because I was hoping it would be just as good as Borean Tundra. Borean Tundra for the Alliance 40s is 19-ish minutes per level, and then Sholazar here is 21-ish minutes per level in the 40s. So not quite as good, but doing these two back to back, I mean, heck, you could probably almost hit 50 with just those two zones right there. So that's an interesting route to look at if you wanted to do just Northrend. Moving into our next faction neutral zone, we have the Storm Peaks. There's a lot of verticality here, and some of the quests will require flying, and since you can't come to this zone till 25, I came here at 30, specifically 31. I went from 31 to 41 in 289 minutes. Not too shabby. I rather like this zone, but I tend to be fond of snowy mountainy places with lots of Norse Titany references, so I'm a bit of a sucker for the Storm Peaks, even though the data isn't that great. Still a cool zone though. Right after the Storm Peaks, we have the other end zone, which is a faction neutral zone of Icecrown, home to the famous Icecrown Citadel, where everyone's favorite Ice Daddy lives, depending on which one we're talking about. Anyways, this is also an end zone, so I came here in the 30s, and I went from 31 to 44 in 388 minutes. I think this might actually be the longest zone in the game. Yeah, I haven't actually found a zone that's longer. It's even longer than Vashj'ir. And get this, I didn't even finish the zone. There is a quest chain and 8+ group quests that I could not do because the elites were just too powerful for me and definitely required a group. So I got probably about 95% of the zone done. So I probably could have hit 45, but that's a long zone. Whew. For our next faction neutral zone, we have kind of a weird one. We have Crystalsong Forest. Now, there isn't actually really quests for this zone. I read that there used to be, and that they were removed. I'm not sure the full history on that. I didn't research too hard. But there are technically 2 whole quests that you can do there, and you reach them by doing the Argent Vanguard quest chain that's actually in Icecrown. So part of this data that you're seeing here is Icecrown because I included that chain. But I went from 31 to 32.5 in 30 minutes. That's the Argent Vanguard quest line, which will send you to Crystalsong Forest to do 2 whole quests. Woo. You collect some wood and kill some nymphs or something. I don't know what's up with that. I'm not sure why there's not a lot of quests here. There's even 2 different faction hubs. There's an alliance side and a horde side, but I don't know. I'm not sure the story on this one, so if you happen to know, feel free to leave in the comments. But if you're curious about the 2 quests themselves for some reason, that's 0.5 right there. That's the 0.5 of the 32.5. And it took me probably 10 minutes to do the 2 quests because they were kind of long. So, yeah, that's Crystalsong Forest, I guess. And for our very last zone in Northrend, we have Wintergrasp. This is not a leveling zone, however, because it is actually a PvP battleground. I suppose you could say that's a leveling zone because you can PvP there and level if you queue for a BG, but that's not the point. We're talking about questing here, and there are no actual quests here in the form of questing for leveling, so not a questing leveling zone. And there we have it. That is Northrend finally done. Oh my goodness, this took me way longer than I thought it would. These zones are so much longer than my memory said they were. I don't quest in Northrend very often just because Outland and Northrend, I know I'm gonna get tomatoes thrown at me for this, but those happen to be my 2 least favorite questing zones in the game just because, well, they're long. Old and long, and I tend to get bored very easily and then I get sidetracked, so I really had to focus here. But Northrend definitely has a lot better results compared to Outland. The times are about the same, really long, but as you can see, if you watched the Outland videos part 1 and 2, the results here as far as XP is just better. You know, you're getting 10, 11, sometimes even 12 levels in each zone, and even in the 40s they hold up pretty well. You feel like you're getting a lot more XP out of it, and the results show that. So I still stand by, if Outland got a buff, it would be comparable. But we're not talking about Outland, we're talking about Northrend. So Northrend's not bad. I think if you did Borean Tundra and then did Sholazar, or did that backwards, Sholazar then Borean Tundra, you could probably hit between 45 and 48, you know, and then throw in like a quarter of another zone and you'd be 50. It wouldn't be the fastest route in the world. Probably take you about 10 to 12 hours. I think Wowhead's accurate on that one for once. So yeah, pretty good zones. Borean Tundra might sneak that in on Alliance somewhere. Maybe, we'll see. We'll see. So now that Northrend is done, I have one more expansion to get through, and that is Warlords of Draenor, the Draenor zones. I'm already about a quarter-ish way done with it, But as a reminder, I have to do those zones, most of those zones, a lot. Like upwards of 6+ times, simply because of the 2 different factions and then, you know, the 2 different outpost options that you got, which some of them do give different quests, different buffs, depending on where you're at. And then there's treasures, which are consistent, so I do have to do those. There's the bonus objectives as well. You know, a zone could be amazing if you don't do the bonus objectives. Well, I won't know until I test it, so that is something I have to test. So this is where all of my new alts that I had slammed through Exile's Reach and have been waiting on a fresh account for me is going to be ready just for Warlords of Draenor, because good grief, I'm going to need it. Anyways, sorry this is a little rambly. I am literally recording this at 6 in the morning because I was determined to get Northrend done, by golly, and I finished it. So, here we are. I hope this was enlightening to you. This was a lot of work, and I learned a lot of valuable information out of it. So, there we go. Draenor next. Expect to see that soon, TM. As always, thank you so much for watching, and remember, it's never too latte.